morning. It is 10 o'clock in the morning. And when we have a Tuesday morning at 10, you know it's time to track the tropics. From very chilly Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
Yeah, pretty cool. In Savannah, Georgia, too. I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
All right, so Jeremy, there are no named storms in the basin right now. That doesn't mean that we're completely quiet, but it just means that there's no cones or tracks or anything like that to show.
Yeah, and we can almost kind of tell both of us were hinting at a change in the air, at least over the lower 48 right now, with this cooler, kind of truer autumn weather finally descending. But as you mentioned, there's some stuff going on in the Atlantic Basin, that little cloud mass out there. We've been watching that for a while, and that is Invest 94L.
Yeah, that's right. So currently, it's the only game in town, and it's not all that well organized. That's a look at the very latest laps from the National Hurricane Center. The development chances on this are going to continue to climb. Currently, a 60% likelihood of forming over the next 2 days' time, and a high 80% likelihood of forming over the next 7 days' time. Computer models on this, Jeremy, though thankfully keep it well away from the United States, which is, at least for its location, another sign that we have entered into the latter part of hurricane season.
Yeah, with that sort of the recurve to the north, this would probably stay east of Bermuda. Looking at the models, might brush by with some rain on northern areas like the Leeward Islands, but I don't think this will be a huge nuisance or troublemaker to anyone right now.
Yeah, and that's honestly, that's like all that we are really looking at in terms of the tropical development signatures over the next couple of days. In the event that this does get named, though, in interesting little point, the next name on the list is the T-name storm, Tammy, and there are only, as of right now, 3 more names on the list.
Yeah, I mean, it has definitely been an active season, so we're at 19 right now, so it's kind of the named storms plus the one in January. So if we do get Tammy, that would be 20, and then we just have 2 names left. And certainly, as we look farther out into the model data, there's been some signs that a model here or there wants to get maybe Southern Gulf or something in the Caribbean going, but I would say confidence maybe a little bit lower in that.
Yeah, so with that said, then we just kind of watch and understand that during these latter months of hurricane season, the patterns do change. So where Invest 94 is out in the central Atlantic, the reality is that those storms do like to try and stay out to sea and recurve. During the month of October, we really watch the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico much closer. And then during November, it's usually the Caribbean kind of staying away from the southeast United States. So at least for now, these trends look very, very good in terms of overall impacts to your area and my area. But that doesn't mean that we are completely out of harm's way completely.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're going to continue to watch it. Remember, last year in November, we had a hurricane hit Florida. So we're not going to say no, hurricane season's over. But as both of us started off with here, our temperatures are pretty cool right now. And the nearshore water temperatures by Savannah, just off our coast, are now at 70 degrees. A lot of locations are starting to drop to the upper 60s. I know the Gulf, Caribbean, it's still warm down there. But that's why the favorite area for development starts shifting a lot farther south.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And being that we continue to get these cold fronts, that should continue to be the case. Our water temperatures here in Florida are in the upper 70s, and that's why climatologically you start to watch more the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. But there's definitely cold fronts on the tropical satellite. That's clearing us out. And, one thing we watch is when a cold front wants to die out over water and then just sit and bubble and bubble and bubble. But there's been so much dry air and these lows have been moving fast enough that we haven't had any of that moisture just kind of sit and bubble yet.
Yeah, and when you talk about the lows, obviously this is something we really were stressing last week. Method we use for long-range forecasting. We're starting to get into this new weather patterns. So we're really watching where these lows track, where they're sort of their strongest. And over the last week, hey, anyone in Florida knows this all too well. You had some severe weather down there, and it was tied to this low and really the storm system that went through the Gulf of Mexico. So I think this one is probably the first one where we really kind of check the box and say, okay,
Yep.
we're going to have to watch this one closely in the next cycle. And maybe this ends up being one of those systems that helps us identify a hot spot.
Right. So just by looking at that trajectory, the 10th that started in the Bay of Campeche kind of worked toward the northern Gulf Coast, made a hard right turn, and came around the Florida Panhandle, crossing North Florida, and then really bombed out off the east coast of the United States, off the east coast of like Delaware and the Delmarva Peninsula there. But what's interesting, Jeremy, as you had mentioned, there's several elements I think to talk about here. The first thing is it is definitely that first storm system to watch. And for me, frustratingly, it's like, oh, good, you literally scraped the entire northern Gulf Coast and then finally decided to come into Florida. So that's the first thing, like, way to make it more difficult for us. That's number one, right? But number two, being that we're entering into an El Nino winter and spring, my area saw an EF2 tornado touchdown, and just outside of my area saw an EF2 tornado touchdown. So come winter and spring, as this particular part of the pattern recycles, I would think that there's going to be that heightened concern for severe weather each and every time.
Yeah, and also it starts to get us to think so far this month, we've had a lot of below average temperatures. So are we going to have kind of lean towards maybe a colder winter across the southeast?
Yeah.
And then you start saying colder than average, and then you pair up some of these storm systems. And could we get one of those rare, maybe winter type events across our area? The last time we've seen any snow, I know you don't see snow down where you're at, even in your coldest, but I would say we average a snowflake here in Savannah every 5 years. And the last time we had real snow here was in 2018. So it's been going on 5+ years now.
Yeah, interesting. I this is why I love this, to learn the climatology of other areas too. Yeah, I mean, we'll get like a snowflake or so every now and then, and there's some people that always will see like misty rain in a light, a street light, and claim that it's, and I'm just like, y'all know that it's 55 degrees outside, like it isn't snowing, but being that it's an El Nino pattern, okay, we're watching the jet stream push further south. That goes into this winter meteorology element, but that would also lend to really focus and change things up in terms of, I would think, sheer numbers of storm systems come, hurricane season next year, or at least you'd think, right?
Yeah, and I think what we'll do is we're tracking those lows. And I think what we could do is once we get into maybe early November, and if we get a week where we don't have really anything in the Atlantic basin, you or I, we can kind of look back at previous El Ninos and then fast forward. We'll pick out some maybe analog years and look at that, and then we'll continue to track our lows. So we can kind of start to put the pieces together for everyone, just show them kind of we're pulling the curtain back here on our long-range forecasts.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm really excited about doing this year is pulling back the curtain and kind of sharing it. And so, for me personally, I'm excited about that. But let's do this. Let's take a look, just so that we've got our bases covered, right? Let's take a look at some of the computer models and just see what's ahead, shall we?
Yeah.
All right, so this is the GFS, and what we're looking at, and I'll widen this out just so that we've got the full Atlantic basin. This is looking at mean sea level pressure anomalies, okay? And Jeremy, while I'm doing this, you want to look at the CFS to just look even longer range. That's never a bad idea. All right, so here we are, and there's what could end up being Tammy on the very bottom center of the computer model screen there. That's Wednesday afternoon. Here's Thursday, Friday, showing like a 984 low, so showing it trying to develop. Now, this is the operational version of the model, of course. Notice also, Friday into Saturday, there's a storm system developing over the Smokies and really bombing out well north of my area and north of your area, Jeremy. So at least in terms of things right now, it looks like we'll both have the opportunity to see perhaps some cooler, drier reinforcement of air, but it doesn't look like we're going to get into any kind of big severe weather threats for either of our areas.
Yeah, and as you mentioned here, looking even longer range, I think we had identified something using one of our other kind of teleconnection methods, the Bering Sea rule. We were watching somewhere maybe around Halloween into the first day or so of November that there could be maybe some sort of storm system nation's midsection, mid-south, and maybe that does sort of track across the southeast or impact Florida. And the CFS model does have a pretty strong system, maybe in those first few days of November. So we'll see if that plays out. Again, that's 300 plus hours out. So we're looking at still a good 10 plus days. So we'll monitor that. I would say by next Tuesday, we'll have a better grasp on that. But that could be something, again, that drags a strong cold front down. And it would probably clear, obviously, maybe most of the Gulf of Mexico. But then does that maybe get down into like the Caribbean and we see a low try to generate near there?
Right. GFS at the moment doesn't show it, but it'll definitely be interesting to watch run by run. All right, so here's the European model, and there is what could become Tammy approaching. And what's interesting is the European model brings Invest 94 into the Leeward Windward Islands there as a weak low. The GFS wants to develop it into Tammy. The European really doesn't seem to want to do that. It keeps it pretty weak. And then beyond that, doesn't really do much more. High pressure builds in. Yeah, just some unorganized, nothing. The European is I got to be honest, it's pretty lackadaisical. No big storms or anything like that trying to show up. And then toward the end of, the European is not really going all that wonky on anything. So I wouldn't mind that at all. Just kind of keep this relatively quieter pattern going. No problems there.
Yeah, I think and just to give you a little firmer date here for that CFS model. And again, this is so far out, but it kind of lines up with that bigger storm that we were talking about, maybe Halloween, early November. It has a very strong cold front heading down to Florida, maybe around November 3rd, 4th.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So we can.
And it potentially, this one at least shows snow in the Great Lakes, upper Midwest, which would be one of the first snows up there. That's not crazy early for them, but it's definitely a bit early, but it does drag down some pretty chilly air.
Yeah. Hey, nothing. I mean, it is the season, right? So let's look at the BSR and just kind of see where we're at. So we're just going to roll through time here and look for storm systems. There's a little something, nothing very big or powerful indicated there.
Right.
But right here, that's a storm system kind of working right across the I-10 corridor. Let's see, valid. So that would be, let me just look at this. Give me 2 seconds. 1, 2. So that's like the 26th of October,
Okay.
something.
So that would be more like the second week of November.
But look at that one there. I mean, that's a big, nasty, big old cold low for many areas. And that would be... That's like the 29th, 28th, 29th. So
we'll see.
Yeah.
And we certainly, when we look at this, typically those bigger, stronger storms are going to be farther towards the Aleutians or somewhere in the Bering Sea. We're south of those Aleutian Islands on this map here. And remember, we're trying to use the North Pacific. We found a little connection with it. Maybe about 14, 19 days later in a specific part of the U.S. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're fast forwarding. We're using a little different methodology here. Yeah,
we always love to use the non-standard stuff, and I'm all about it. Interesting little thing here. This would be like November 2nd, November 3rd. You've got a pretty significant low, whether or not it's oceanic or not.
Right.
I mean, and we've seen that signature for some time around, just after Halloween as well.
That map there actually was from when, though? That was a few days ago, right?
2 days ago. Yep.
Okay, so around the 15th?
Yep.
So that's why we've been talking about maybe like Halloween, very early November. And the CFS model definitely drags a very strong front down here. So that would... I think that's probably the next real time frame that might want to watch. And again, as you said, not necessarily tropical, but we'll see if something gets latched onto the front that comes through. Right.
And then beyond that, we can go nerdy and just kind of try and plot the GFS using the BSR mentality, just to kind of see if there's anything way out there, and maybe a little something east. Nothing crazy at the moment. It looks like kind of that late October, early November timeframe. And then there's that'll be interesting. That would be like mid-November, Jeremy. And I've seen for several days, modeling wanting to kind of show another decent hit of some sort of energy mid-November. So whether or not it plays out, we'll have to wait and see. But it's interesting stuff nonetheless.
Yeah, and one thing that's pretty consistent on a lot of these models, we don't have like big, huge warm-ups for my area coming up. It's pretty much average or below average temperatures, and that's definitely sort of flipping the script, because we had a couple months from late spring through summer that ranked like top 10 warmest in my area.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the average through just before this cool snap, the average temperature, including morning and night, put us at the warmest year on record in Orlando, and the average high temperature put us at the second warmest on record, behind like 1920. So this cool front certainly will change things around, but we've definitely had a bunch of heat here, so these adjustments are very welcome. But at least for Central Florida, this is very normal for an El Nino fall into winter.
Right. And like you said, you already had a little kind of that round of severe weather. We'll see if that's common or if that's just a specific part of the cycle, or if you're getting multiple rounds of severe weather this winter. Those are all things we'll watch, and we'll continue to plot the lows and kind of keep you in the loop of what we are thinking leading up to next hurricane season. This one's not done, but this one's starting to give us some clues for the following season.
Right, and we're going to absolutely be sharing it all with you. And Jeremy, I like what you said too, like doing some updates in the off season just to kind of update everybody on what we're looking at to open up the transparency for our methodology and our forecasting.
Yeah, and I think probably in December, we don't know specifically yet, but that part of the pattern that came through with your severe weather, the low in the Gulf, that's something that should be due back probably, I would say, in December or late November.
Yeah, indeed. Any questions, anybody, before we wrap this thing up? Mark, I will take a look at that. I appreciate it. Mickey points out, and I think that this is so funny, Mickey says, Mother Nature always finds a way to even out. Isn't it funny how that works?
Yeah, I mean, so you're talking about the warmest weather, and then now we're kind of swinging back cooler. So, yeah, you probably, unless we see a huge warm-up November, December, you'll probably fall back from ending up being the warmest.
And when you think about it, weather is, excuse me, weather is just Earth's attempt at a balance anyway. High pressure tries to fill low pressure, and so that's what weather is in general. So it makes sense. It translates into, beginning of the year, end of the year, and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, and it's also a sign that we're definitely seeing things now we didn't really see in the last pattern. Right. So, I mean, you and I study these things, and we're looking at a lot of stuff now that kind of we're like, that's definitely a new part of the pattern.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100% different. To me, this is a very dramatically different pattern. I mean, we've always, for me, and I've done this a lot shorter duration than you. I've done it, like 3, 4, 5 years at this point. But this is the most aggressively different pattern from one to another that I've seen. And I don't know if you would back that up and agree or disagree.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you get to that October 10th or a little bit past it, and the switch just flips.
Yeah.
And something different about it. But yeah, we already have seen kind of a low move in a little different direction there in the Gulf. Mm-hmm. We've had some pretty strong upper Midwest storm systems. They were very, very dry in that parts of that area, and they just in the last week had about 1 to 3 inches of rain.
Yeah.
You've finally started to cool down a little bit now, and yeah, some changes are here.
Love it. Love it. All right. Anything else to add, my friend?
No, I think that's it for today.
All right. So we'll see you all on Tuesday of next week to track the tropics. But in the meantime, have the long sleeves. From chilly Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
See y'all.